Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and thanks for joining our webinar today looking at the digital transformation of the food value chain. We have a great panel of experts today ready to give their thoughts and insights, and I thank them very much for taking the time to share them with us all today. So I'd like to welcome Jared Anderson from ADM, Shana Day from Better Food Ventures, and Matt Karsten from Landers Cooperative, who all have extensive experience in this area. And the moderator for the session is Aaron Magenheim, who's the CEO and founder of AgTech Insight and works with multiple companies on leveraging technology for benefit throughout food production and supply. One final thing from me before I hand over to Aaron is to say that if you have the ability to ask questions through the webinar platform, and I'd encourage you to do this. I can't promise that we'll get to them all, but we'll do our best to integrate them into the conversation. So without further ado, over to you, Aaron. The floor is yours. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks a lot, Pete. Appreciate having us on board today. So we have an exciting conversation we'll be having here over the next hour. We'll be kind of walking a bit through technologies that are being used and from the producer level, kind of moving out through supply chain as the conversation moves on, and then we'll spend a few minutes at the end talking a little bit more about kind of newer, exciting, emerging technologies, kind of where things are going in the next few years and things along those lines. So yeah, I'd like to give each one of the panelists just a few seconds to tell you a little bit more about themselves. My name's Aaron Magenheim, CEO founder of AgTech Insight as well as Growers Insight, and we work on strategy, but especially kind of focus more on the implementation side of technology with companies all around the world. And I am in Salinas, California today. Jared.
Great, hi Aaron. So I work for ADM, which is one of the world's largest agriculture processors and food ingredient providers. My team within the company is tasked at looking at building the emerging technologies that influence the way the world produces, distributes, buys, sells, and consumes food. So I'm lucky to be able to play with the really fun stuff out there.
Great. Matt.
Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it, Aaron. And Matt Karstens, and I work with Landers Cooperative, and we're based in central Iowa. Actually, our home office is in Ames, Iowa, and we cover 23 counties here in Iowa and a few southern tier of counties in Minnesota. And we're owned by our farmers, which is the cooperative part of it. We're proud of that heritage and representing our farmer owners every day and helping them in this very topic of how do we really lean into the future of agriculture and food with this space of technology and data and really make this come to life all the way from their farms to the kitchen tables of consumers. So excited to be a part of the discussion today.
Great, thanks. And Shana.
Yes, Shana Day. I'm a partner with Better Food Ventures. We're early stage investors in food tech and ag tech, focused primarily on IT, so hardware, software applications within the sector. And I cover in-field technology and post-harvest, so from the farm gate through distribution, looking at the different technologies and making investments into that space. I am dialed in today from sunny Central California, where it's expected to be about 107 degrees. So happy we're doing this on the earlier side.
Great. Well, thanks everybody. So let's just dive right into it. So we're going to start talking a little bit kind of about producers. So just kind of let's see, Matt, you want to start out with kind of telling us how you're seeing technologies being used by producers in your world, kind of what's working today.
Well, absolutely, Aaron. This is a big space for farmers, whether it's on the cropping side, livestock, all the way through the food value chain, without a doubt. So today, what's working well, I'd say, without a doubt, automation, the use of technology to really apply variable rate and selective different products, and that, particularly in agronomy, has been a big value within our industry. If you imagine a football field and that football field having 10,000 flowers on that field, We can make decisions flower by flower or even a group of flowers. It's an amazing technology that we have today to really be more selective in how we produce a single crop, a single hybrid or plant, all the way through the entire field or farming operation on the agronomy side. On livestock, it's really now down to, and I'll talk specifically to dairy, which is a big part of our animal nutrition business here at Landis, is about the individual cow. We can now use technology to know more about that cow than she may know. We'll know hours or days that she's about to be sick before she does. And I refer to it as Fitbits. The cows have Fitbits like we wear around their necks or different legs, part of their body that helps monitor temperature, monitors the intake, how it chews, all the things that goes on with that cow. That really helps us be more precise. And then all of this can be put together in a way from the farm that allows us to do traceability, identity preserve, sustainability scoring on down the line to be able to put the power of not only what's in the arsenal for the farmer to better produce the crops in a way that are profitable for them, better for the environment, but also then be able to take that and move it all the way through that food value chain to tell the story, again, whether it's about sustainability or traceability or certain traits, starch, whatever the case may be. We've got the ability to turn that on all the way through. So I like to say in agriculture, it's absolutely an exciting time, because the truth of the matter is, and we'll get into this, Aaron, we're at the very cusp of where this is going. And the bigger journey really lies ahead on the data side and how we turn on even more power to these technologies and really lean into the future of where we're going. And we'll get to that. So I'll stop there for that piece, Aaron.
Great. Matt, or Jared, Shana, you have anything you'd like to add?
I could probably add from my perspective is the data piece is key. There's so much data that is being generated and will be generated, as we put more sensors like the Fitbits on, livestock, but even sensors out in the field, visual recon through drone imagery. There's so much satellite imagery. There's so much data that's being generated. And really the question is, how do we consume that information for insights and combine that data, from the farm level all the way through the whole ecosystem, even out on social media, to be able to identify new kinds of food trends. What are consumers really looking for? What kind of food products are they looking for? Are they looking for something that's global, like other countries? New kinds of tastes are being generated. You see trends like the Impossible Burger coming up, and those things are really in the first iterations of what can be produced. But all this information that's being generated, we can continuously derive new insights from, make things faster, make things more really eco-friendly and appropriate, from a nutritional perspective and really from a global sustainability perspective. We take a step back and you look at everything from a system perspective. It's no longer just you're focused on one aspect, but you got to look at everything across the entire spectrum, the entire system, from the farm all the way to the fork, to the mouth, into the body, down into the microbiome. It's conceptually crazy, which is fantastic because we're able to use these new technologies, artificial intelligence, which is emerging. And the barriers to entry to use these kinds of technologies are becoming so low now. You would think that it's very expensive to use some of these things, but it's not. There's so much open source, software out there. People are generating these new technologies. Our capability to use these things to build wondrous, solutions that'll benefit the world are just always emerging and increasing in speed. So things to think about.
Definitely. Shana, what are you seeing kind of from the investment standpoint on the field side of technologies, and we can kind of roll in a little bit to kind of the next question that Jared just alluded to, as well as there's barriers, there's some barriers that are still out there. Definitely, that's why there's a lot of opportunity left in the ag tech industry. But what are you seeing kind of on the farm level around adoption, barriers, and really opportunities at the farm level?
Sure. So the way I kind of organize the farm tech marketplace in my mind is really around the kind of key activities of the producer. So, digital agronomy and production, and the guys have sort of touched on this, but that's field monitoring, sensors, aerial imagery, automation. And then you kind of move to the farm management side, right? The software tools that are increasingly being used, around record keeping, work orders, planning, resource allocation. And then finally, the of course, very key activity of a producer is market access and finance. And I'm certainly seeing, especially in this kind of post-COVID new reality, marketplaces to get products to buyers, new finance products to really free up working capital, commodity marketing, trading tools. So a lot of interesting technologies are starting to percolate in that part of the kind of ecosystem as well. I would say from a barrier standpoint, we are still very much in the early days. We've still got interoperability, connectivity issues. We've got an abundance of point solutions, and I like that Jared mentioned the system kind of concept there. But really today, I think we're still seeing very few truly integrated kind of system of systems. I think that's on the horizon. We're moving in that direction, but we've still got some work to do there. I would say, really, I think one of the key barriers, and when we're talking to startups and thinking about investments, is especially on this farm tech side, really the ability to clearly link a financial or a resource impact to the technology. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're an aerial imaging company and you're charging, I don't know, 20 bucks an acre for a season of flights, and maybe you get 2 or 3 NDVI imagery reports on your field a month, and maybe you see that your back 40 is stressed, and perhaps it's an irrigation issue. So you need to sort of really look at perhaps fixing your irrigation lines, or maybe you can remediate this a couple days, weeks sooner, and have an impact on yield. But there's really a struggle for a lot of these companies to link that activity to dollars. And I think that's what a lot of growers are still looking for, is what is the financial impact? What is the ROI of these technologies that we're using? So that's one of the things that, we're still sort of like I said, in the early days from a barrier to adoption standpoint.
Yeah, I'd like to back that up a bit more, is that from a software perspective, the digital aspect of software is the barriers to entry are low. The physical aspects that have to be considered throughout this entire value chain, there's a lot of friction there, and that's going to take time to overcome. Those are the physical, delivery systems, the machinery, all those things have to be considered, and those are things that are going to take time. But from a digital perspective, the advancements of software, the advancements of artificial intelligence, that's piquing my space's interest, what I tend to focus on. So like being able to generate the data by putting out physical sensors, the imagery, that we can capture from some of these sites, that's evolving and it's coming on the scene. But if you have the vision to be able to say, once those things are out there, where do we want to be at? What can we use, or what can we start producing now from to affect the system as it gets improved? Where do we want to be in the future? That's where my mind is at. That's where I'm lucky enough to have a team that focus on that aspect. So
and I think that's great. It's a yes and, right? It's ground truthing with sensors in the field. That's a critical component. But the big data, the satellite imagery, the huge data sets, it's both of those combined together that really create the very interesting opportunities. And we're getting there. But I think one of the areas, so my background's in mobile, wireless, and communications. I spent about 15 years in investment banking in that sector. And it's really what I'm keen to see evolve is that platform, right? Who is going to step into the space? Is it going to be a Deere? Is it going to be a Google? Is it going to be a Microsoft? And have that data platform for the cleansing and the quality and the organization of data. So a lot of these really interesting, innovative companies can build on that common operating system. And it's probably not going to be one. It's probably going to be several. But it feels like we're starting to trend in that direction.
I totally agree with that. I think the companies that bring to market a comprehensive platform, whether they be the large companies, as you mentioned, or even a startup that might be consumed by the bigger players, that's evolving rapidly. I'm seeing so many startups approach the company that have, the nice shiny, artificial intelligence algorithm, but it's so minor compared. You have to look at the entire system. You've got to have a comprehensive ecosystem and the tooling and the software and the intelligence to support that entire ecosystem as it builds out. At least that's where I'm at right now with it.
No, this is Matt, and I think all those are really, really well said. But I think there's for the audience, Aaron, there's a really, really big obstacle that needs to be highlighted here. And that is the fact that 39% here in the US of those living in rural America lack the FCC's minimum of broadband service. And just so we're all clear, the minimum is 25 megabytes per second on download, 3 megabytes per second on upload, which is not very fast. So we can talk about all the great things. I unfortunately get to live with in the world of these farmers that they can see all the great stuff that Jared and Shana are talking about, and it is wonderful. But we have to find a way to get the speed of the internet to run these technologies, to download this data, to do the things that need to happen. I often refer to it, and other companies besides Landis, like Land O'Lakes, spends a lot of time talking about this as well, which is back to the 1940s of rural electrification. We can keep talking about all these great things, but if we can't turn the power on in them to use them in the way they're intended, it really becomes obsolete. And the other thing I'd put in this is that all of these tools are great, but if we don't have the high-speed internet and if we're not collecting all the data, today on any given field, there's over 100 data points that we can collect. And today we've got maybe 30 to 50 of them. So to really get where we need to go, we've got to find ways to manually enter this data and find other ways to speed up the entry of the data beyond manual entry. Because in any given field, it could take for a farmer anywhere from an hour to 2.5 hours to enter all this data. And if you think about Landis' 7,000 farmer owners of our company, and let's just assume each of those have 5 fields, which is probably low, you can tell the amount of time it takes to really turn the power on in these technologies. So I fear a little bit that we keep moving so far ahead, which is awesome, but we need to get the base or foundation of this done right, which is just simple blocking and tackling of high-speed internet and all data points entered on the fields, on the animals, and then be able to build from it and really turn on the great power that Jared and Shana are talking about, which is very exciting.
Yeah, that point there is the whole physical aspects. There's opportunity there for people who are inventive and who are willing to do the hard work to get that physical infrastructure available to those remote areas. That's opportunity. That's that would be a very interesting space to be able to play in to develop businesses or develop the tooling and the companies that could actually go out there and support that kind of work.
No, it's
there is a lot of work, being done there, because it's become one of the top issues for U.S. government, as well as a lot of other governments seeing that that's an issue. So I'm actually involved in a super cluster that's organized by FCC and other government agencies to try to build a blueprint to help help bring connectivity to rural areas. So, and the tough thing, I think with that piece of the conversation is it's not necessarily an ag problem. It's a rural problem.
Yep.
And so, from an ag space, we absolutely need that. But, we also have conversations. Is it going to come from a local kind of provider, or is something like, like Elon Musk's new company that's trying to provide internet to everybody in the world? Are those the people that will be able to handle that? So I think, the key takeaway is that we have, there's still a lot of barriers out there, whether they're physical or whether they are, more on a cultural side of things as well. So I wanted to kind of, you mentioned that, there's a few data points being pulled from the field today. We need data in order to train machine learning and in order to at some point get to AI and get to the fun, exciting stuff. But, the information that we are collecting today, is that being fed up the supply chain at all? Is that being shared? You know, data sharing and privacy has always been a subject, especially in the farming communities. But are you seeing any of the information, you know, being collected on a farm level, you know, being provided, you know, to your company, Jared or Matt? Are you able to collect any of that information and use that, you know, from your farmers, and use that in your organizations, or kind of how do you see some of that that communication being done today?
This is Jared. So from my perspective, it's not a simple answer. There are pockets of development occurring. The vast majority of data that is being generated out there, even in the world, even outside of agriculture, is considered dark data, meaning that it's generated and not being used. It just sits there. So that's where AI can help eventually, being able to consume that data. But you mentioned are we actually receiving that data? The reason why I said it's not simple is because depending on the data type, the kind of data, the quality of data being generated, the data in itself is valuable, and people who are generating the data can recognize that, but they don't have the I guess the industry hasn't matured enough, and this is even outside of agriculture, where they understand the value of the data, so they're hesitant to freely provide it. And if they do freely provide it, then they come back and say, well, why did I do that? So you may see lots of people saying, oh, or lots of startups saying, well, here, share your data with us and we can help you generate insights. It's so early in this technological revolution, if you want to call it, that you're going to see fits and starts, and you know, people taking 2 steps backwards and forwards. So it's not a simple answer. Ultimately, it would be fantastic if the data flowed freely, you know, in one point of view, but you've got to be able to qualify or quantify the value there and let people own that. So there's things that have to be considered.
Yeah, Jared, I really like your answer there. I think that's very well said. It's a very complex answer, and maybe a way to simplify it a little bit is if the audience here thinks about them as consumers, who are you comfortable sharing your data with? And it's the same challenge a farmer has. If you put yourself in your consumer shoes, are you comfortable with all of the data being out there of your family, whether it's medical or purchasing habits or eating habits? The answer is probably not. And the same is true for the farmer. And it's where Landis, as our company, is being owned by the farmers, has to act as that integrator, that collection point, and get the right permissions from the farmer to do the things that Jared so eloquently talked about, because there is huge power in it. But today, I remember about, I think it was March 9th to be exact, a group of our farmers got together and said the number of people calling, wanting their data, telling them all the great things they can do with it and that they'll protect it, scares them. And we've now pushed it. Yeah, absolutely. And so how we use companies that they do trust and own in, like a Landis as one example, is the secret to really moving this forward and taking the giant leaps that we need to get to the stuff Jared's talking about, because that is, and Shana, you know this well as well, and what you see is this is their livelihood, and just opening up their playbook of data is not going to happen. We have to find a better path and use those trusted advisors that they have to really turn the power on this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll just build on that, especially that trusted advisor piece with an intriguing, I think, example of how this is happening. But first, I just back it up and say, you know, I also think this question very much depends on the cropping system. Are we talking about fresh produce versus permanent crops versus grains and oil seeds, you know, versus livestock, dairy, seafood? I think that data is flowing in different ways. You know, certainly in fresh produce, the traceability requirements, you know, we're probably getting a little bit more flow of data there than maybe some of the other cropping systems. But I think the example that like I said, I'm intrigued by, and maybe it's just a little bit different angle, is really thinking about, for example, data that's being fed from the farms to the financial institutions for better risk assessment, faster underwriting, you know, the potential to reward farmers who are maybe implementing sustainability practices with preferred financial products, rates, et cetera. So, in my mind, that example sort of looks like, let's say a corn grower in Nebraska who's implementing certain regenerative practices, no-till or some nitrogen runoff management, and you have a digital record to validate that, and you validate your practices. You're also already providing your bank, your financial institution with your P&L, your financial statements, components of your inventory, but now you're able to do that digitally with some management information systems. And that can mean you're moving from a couple, your line of credit being approved in days and weeks versus months. You're not using, 9-month-old information to supply that banker. And, maybe then you find yourself in a situation where you're getting a preferred rate because you can demonstrate these sustainability practices. You're lower risk because they can see sort of all this digital information. You can kind of play that out in your minds. And I think that sort of financial piece of this is really intriguing, and we're going to continue to see improvements in that data exchange. And again, this is certain, this isn't sharing all of your data with a technology startup. This is your bank, your lender, somebody trusted in your financial support structure.
Great. So we had a couple questions come through. We've been focused a little bit more kind of U.S., North America in the conversation, but we had a couple questions come through more around, are these solutions being used in developing countries? I travel a lot, and I can drive 6 hours through the middle of nowhere in Argentina and have a significantly better cell phone service than I do traveling through Iowa. And I see that a lot of the times in developing countries because they're not building on old infrastructure, like we are here. So does anybody have any ideas or insight that they'd like to add, on kind of how technologies are being utilized in emerging countries?
At least from my perspective, you basically hit on it. Depending on the country and the jurisdiction, the local government, and so on, some of these emerging technologies or more advanced technologies are more easily adaptable or brought onto the market. They don't have as many restrictions, and sometimes they don't have the infrastructure and the friction that they have to overcome. And people are ready to adopt these things. Use of your cell phone in various countries is much more prevalent than it is here in the US in many regards. So I see many farmers, even in Africa, wanting to use these newer technologies. They have access to more broadband type capabilities and monitoring systems, especially through these cell phones. So it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting. And then, as was mentioned earlier, with like Elon Musk, for example, popping up a bunch of satellites around the planet, there are other companies doing the same thing. The broadband usage, the availability of Wi-Fi, for example, or just internet, satellite technologies is going to be more freely available. You would hope freely, but I'm not sure quite yet. Maybe I shouldn't have said it that way, but to me, it's very, very exciting out there. And again, every country is a little different, so.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron, from my standpoint, I'm certainly seeing some interest, especially capital flowing into these kind of digital full stack companies in emerging markets or developing markets, where you can source your inputs via e-commerce. You can get agronomic advice. You can share information with other farmers in the area. You can access, offtake markets. You can market your dairy, your produce, your grain, all using digital tools. So you can have kind of that full stack from input to offtake, using very little physical infrastructure. So I think there's, like I said, a lot of capital is flowing into that space, and those companies are growing very, very quickly.
Yeah, they may be lighter technologies a lot of the time to get entry into the market, but they're building kind of building that baseline infrastructure that we talked about that we need to really have success with this stuff for the longer term, it seems like. So I want to move a little bit further kind of to the farm gate through kind of supply chain, and talk a little bit about what types of technologies are being utilized further down the supply chain. Jared, you want to kind of jump into that one?
Yeah, it's really the whole machinery that's involved, the plants, the transportation systems, the water transportation systems, the shipping, the trucking, the monitoring, the refrigerators, for example. All those systems are being monitored and sensored enabled, and that data we're collecting. And I'm sure every other company out there who has insights into it, they're able to collect this data. The whole idea is to optimize the system as best as you can. You want things to be faster, more accurate. So we have the technology now to really crunch that. Now it just takes the work to implement those systems, to use the algorithms that are available, to build the models, to crunch the data, to identify better efficiencies, to optimize the system. So it's just an ongoing process in that aspect.
Yeah, this is Matt. I think that's well said too, Jared. And I would say, yes, it's about, downstream more so as you get closer to the consumer, about reducing water use, energy use, more efficient transportation. But we really have to remember, as you start moving into the consumer side of this equation, is what is it they're really looking for? And today it's that transparency of the journey of the product, and what did that do to the environment, and how did that have a positive effect? And as you start thinking globally, this is a UN initiative that we all have to stand up for and really be a part of. But it's important, again, as Jared highlighted, it's about the data. And that data and that journey starts on the farm. If you think about grocery stores with over 4,000 products that contain corn and products from the farm, that's a lot of products. And we have to start thinking about that data and how is it developed? How does that tie out to that consumer? Because that's what the middle of the supply chain is looking for. How do they better produce these products in a way that resonates with the consumer, that gets them to pull their product off the shelf and not the competitive brand? And today, this whole piece of sustainability really plays, and you can see it in the grocery store shelves today. That's what they're looking for. So we've got to make sure we're getting all data points at that farm to answer all those questions that not only helps the farmer, but helps that entire food value chain, or even apparel or cosmetics, all through what we do on the farm through that. And that's that midpoint, not only what they do with technology and water, energy, transportation, but how they collect that data from the farm to keep that momentum going and be able to tell a more transparent story to that consumer.
Hey, Aaron, can I just kind of build on that a little bit as well? I mean, one of the things I think gives me a little bit of heartburn is seeing more and more CPG, large CPG, consumer packaged goods companies, as well as smaller upstarts as well, making real sustainability commitments to the marketplace. And in the smaller companies, it can be a core part of their brand. But how is that messaging connected to what's actually happening on the farm? How are those brands helping those farmers, whether it be premiums or whatever it is, helping them, fulfill those promises that they're making to the market? And today I see a real disconnect there. I've seen several of those large brands kind of come out and make statements that are exciting to the consumer and aligned with where the consumer is, but the farmers who are supplying are saying, how in the world are we going to do this without more support from the supply chain? So I'm hopeful that sort of is an impetus to start to use more digital record keeping to share that information. But for those brands as well to make more strategic sourcing decisions once they have that data. But today, I still think there's a gap there.
Yeah, you actually touched upon something we're looking at is what value can we provide the farmer? What value can we generate from the entire supply chain so the farmer themselves can have greater insight as to what's going to happen downstream so they can make better decisions at the farm level. So
I think this kind of segues into a question that we had pop up, and people we're mentioning sustainability quite a bit, and so as you kind of where is the value? I've been in conversations with leadership from one of the largest meat companies in the world, saying, hey, we feed the world, we'll never deal with any of the sustainability or specialty or anything except like we're going to keep doing what we've done for years. And then you have other companies that that come from a completely different standpoint. But so where is the demand coming from is the question. For this data flowing from the farmer through through the supply chain to the consumer, because there are some differentiators and brands that have been able to demand a little bit higher price from the consumer. But where is the demand? Is it from processors saying, hey, if we have a better idea of what's coming in, we're going to be able to manage our processing facility better and not have to shut down a line or a machine because a truck didn't show up on time? Is it business related? Do you think it's more consumer related? Is it short term? Is it long term? Like, really, where do you think that demand for both kind of better visibility as well as sustainability and stuff, where do you think this demand is coming from?
I think, this is Jared, I think it's the entire system. Demand is coming from all aspects. If you look at it from the ground, from the soil, all the way to somebody's putting food in their mouth, to what's happening to their body, that entire system, the folks that are looking at the inefficiencies or the opportunities through that entire system, that's where the demand is. It's everywhere. People who have the vision to be able to say, this is inefficient, let's try something better, or this is our market, this is what we own, it's never going to change. There's somebody else out there who's going to come up with a disruptive idea. You have this whole disruptive innovation. It's a concept that's flowing out there. So many different companies are starting to look at how disruptive innovation is affecting their entire their basic thought around why they exist as a company. So they need to look at opportunities. Individual farmers, the same thing. Unless you're trying to take advantage of the newer technologies or seeing what you can do to improve what you're doing, somebody else will come along and find something to improve what you're doing. Or there's risk if you stay static. You might be fine. However, my bet would be on the innovators, the disruptors, and that's the entire spectrum. The entire system can be affected. So
yeah,
it's not.
I think that's some good comments, but I would look at it through a slightly different lens. That at the end of the day, everyone's doing what they think they have to do to sell more products, and Shana mentioned it, particularly from consumer packaged good companies to that consumer. And we have to be really careful here about what we're promising and what this means to the whole food system. Because as much as we want to sit and talk about how important sustainability is, and let me be clear, it is important. But it's easy for us to say that in countries where we can afford to pay more, that we're willing to buy that brand because it resonates with us. But if we have to overhaul the entire food system, starting at the farm level, to do that and produce farm less efficiently, or without the technology that it really takes and the data to back it, then have we really fulfilled our mission of feeding this growing hungry population economically and sustainably? And so I think we have to really try to connect the supply chain instead of having the middle piece. And I've seen this time and time again. A company has an employee that was on a farm with their grandfather or grandmother back 20 years ago, and now they're the expert. And because the right thing from a packaging standpoint is to say that this is how it was raised or produced, and that drives cost for the farmer, is that really right? Have we done the right thing to help feed, back to one of the earlier questions you had, Aaron, of developing countries that aren't as fortunate as we are in certain parts of the world? We really have to take a step back and breathe a little bit and understand the whole cause and effect. Just because it may be good for a CPG doesn't mean that's where we really need to go as we try to do the things globally that we need to do with food. So I really think about companies like our own that are owned by farmers, where we're touching every step already. we can tell you with the right amount of data what's gone on and where the improvement areas are and the steps that we will be taking to do that, to secure food profitably and to feed as many people as possible and do it in the best sustainable way that's possible today. And then we can start turning on some of the power of the technologies and things we're talking about. But I'll use the phrase here and stop with, we've gotten the cart in a lot of cases ahead of the horse. And that doesn't mean that isn't what we should be doing in the future, but there is a journey to moving everyone in that supply chain that direction. And I think we've lost really some sight of that. And it's disappointing to me. And it goes off of what Shana was saying, is when you get that piece of the channel ahead of the farmer where this journey really begins, it's really disheartening, especially with the economics of a farming operation today, where you get a CPG company trying to override that's honestly just out of bounds, in my opinion, as a company owned by farmers.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you know, we're going back to where we kind of started the conversation was, you know, we really just need more and better data put into platforms so we can understand the business value behind this stuff. Because a lot of times, you know, people want sustainability. Absolutely, everybody wants sustainability, but if they're not willing to pay for it, you know, it becomes a challenge, and you have to look at the timing as well. I mean, my mom was buying organic stuff, you know, 35 years ago when I was a kid, and there was not organic. And now every store you walk into, most parts of the world, you can find organic foods, but you know, it's taken 30 years for that market to grow. But you'd have also seen, you know, the cost of that organic food go down significantly. So yeah, I think, you know, the challenge with a lot of these technologies is tying the business value, you know, to the additional work or the additional traceability and insights that you provide. So wanted to kind of jump into here, kind of, you know, there's constant changing global trends. We live in a global economy, whether people think that they're just going to buy American and or buy local. Moving out of this pandemic, I think is something people like to talk about, but we're too globally oriented at this point to really go that direction. But you know, so when we start looking at kind of global consumer trends plus the pandemic, you know, they create supply and demand challenges, you know, and so what ideas, what types of tech you guys seeing that could help, you know, help bring those data points together, help, you know, producers understand more of, you know, in California, we're in the beginning of our planting season, and they're saying, you know, some guys are saying we're going to plant like normal, other guys are saying we're not planting anything, and there's a lot in between. And so what kind of tech do you see is out there that can kind of help manage and monitor and provide more insights into you know, what's going on and kind of help even out you know, the supply chain issues that are being very obvious in the last few months around the world?
Well, for me, Aaron, this is Matt. It's a real simple answer to that question. Any tech that we come forth, and a good example of this True Care Insights engine, has to be able to balance economics for the farmer and the rest of the supply chain with the desired outcome. When we try to just pick a part of the supply chain, lift it out and go, this is what has to happen, and everybody else get in line, doesn't matter what the economics are, we lose. So we have to bring technology that allows the farmer to look at things from an economic and an environmental and whatever else we want to look at and be able to tie those back. It's the only path to success. If we try to force a farmer or a production plant or a CPG or a consumer in a direction, any part of that supply chain breaks down. So when we bring technology that helps the farmer make more money and helps them do it in a way that's better for the environment, better for their operation, we'll win. Whether it's livestock, row crop, doesn't matter. And if we always keep our crosshairs on that piece, we'll win every time up and down that supply chain. It's when we, again, cherry pick a piece of it and go, I'm going to go make money on this and this claim. We end up in these debates and debacles that in some cases, like Shana and Jared mentioned, it's a mess.
Jared, Shana, you have anything to add around kind of the how to flatten out the supply and demand challenges and kind of the consumer trends?
I guess
go ahead,
go
Jared.
ahead, Shana.
I think for me, I wish I had a silver bullet here. I wish I had a great answer here. What I've seen is a lot of investment at the endpoints, right? In farm tech, in precision ag, and then on the other side of the value chain with the consumer experience, right? A lot of meal delivery kits, last mile delivery. We're seeing obviously a huge increase in online shopping, for your grocery needs. But relatively very little investment has been made in the messy middle, right? That space in between from the farm gate to the distributor, or to the retailer, actually. And I think, that's where we're really looking for tech companies who can help ease and help provide that data that gives consumer signaling information through the supply chain. And for example, we just made an investment in a company called Afresh, and they're really doing that at the retail point. They're helping make better buying decisions for those buyers at the retail locations, to really optimize, to reduce waste, and have better insights into what impacts buying behavior. Now, that information should flow up and down the supply chain, right? And what I find is a lot of it stops with the processors, with the food manufacturers, and that information doesn't flow back to the grower. And granted, you can only do so much, right? You've got only so many, one harvest a year, maybe if you're a fast turn row crop, a couple, but there's not a lot of flexibility that you have in timing. There's some with harvest timing and so forth, but to be able to aid in getting that information to flow up and back is really critical, and we're just not seeing that handoff yet. Now, we do see some potential in technologies like blockchain or even digital ledgers, that we're starting to move in that direction. And in some cases, blockchain is too robust, let's say, for some of these applications, and the numbers don't pencil. But to be able to kind of share a digital ledger, through trusted partners, you're starting to get that kind of information flow, but we're just not there yet to make these kind of critical supply and demand decisions when we see a dislocation in the supply chain.
I guess I'll take another viewpoint, and it really builds on what I think everybody's saying, is, again, looking at the entire system as a whole. There's been great advancements in precision farming. There's been great advancements in understanding what can be done in monitoring the fields and the soil and the water and the temperatures and the growing and the seeds and so on. The middle of the whole piece, the whole delivery system of the supply chain, there's constant investment being made there. It doesn't necessarily mean constant improvement in brand new technologies as there are at the edges, which is like the farm. Now, the other end is there are constant improvements at the human nutrition level, like DNA-based diets, investments in understanding the microbiome, the consumption of the food product, what it actually does on the body. Those are, scientifically backed, systems we're trying to look at to see what kind of foods are being produced, how are the foods being transferred along the supply chain all the way into a person's body, and how does it affect the person themselves. So there's great advancements in the kind of technologies looking at that level of information. So at both ends of the spectrum, from the farm level to the actual consumption of the food product by a human being, big advancements are going on there, and new leaps are occurring in our understanding of the different those systems there. The middle of it, this whole supply chain, there's always investments going on, new kinds of processes being figured out, and new efficiencies being determined, but it's not flashy. It's you're trying to deliver new trains or new delivery systems, looking at barges and freights, and how you distribute food. You had mentioned like the last mile delivery. Are we sending food to supermarkets, or are we going directly to the house? It's the edges, both ends there's great activity happening there. In the middle, there's always activity, but it's not flashy. So, and it's not one big answer. I see there's answers across the entire system going on. It's not like we have to take a step back and figure out the whole thing at once. That's not going to happen, and that's not even rational. It's more of there's activities. People are going to figure out the best thing for the farmers. People are going to figure out the best things for the end consumer. You know, from a health-wise, people are going to figure out the best way to improve the infrastructure in the middle. But all in all, it will come together. You know, we're constantly improving. Even 10 years from now, 50, 100 years from now, there will always be improvements going on here. So at least that's
Great.
how I'm viewing it.
So I want to spend the last few minutes here kind of jumping a little bit more into like the new emerging tech side, you know, which is where people like to talk, but where is the reality of this stuff? So, you know, when I started spending time in Silicon Valley in 2014, I thought within 3-4 years at the most, you know, ag tech would be a big industry. Everybody would be using it. You know, we'd get quick adoption and things would be moving quickly. And that hasn't happened. We've moved 10% in the last 6 years of where I thought in 2014 we'd moved. So things are a lot slower. But so I have a couple questions here. One, you know, where would you like to see the industry? What's really exciting, you know, in the next few years? You know, in a perfect world, where would you like to see if we could figure out broadband, if we could figure out you know, platforms, kind of what does that look like? Shana, you want to jump in there?
Yes, and I have a feeling I know what Jared and Matt, the direction that they're going to go. So I'm going to take a little bit different angle for this one, and I might also take off my venture capital hat and put on maybe more of a private equity hat. But I am optimistic about the innovation in the messy middle, you know, in the food processing, in value add. I think that there's a real opportunity to kind of have a lot of these big equipment companies who have been in the industry for decades and decades, you know, 100 years for some of them, and to really start to look at how they differentiate their hardware with software. And maybe these aren't necessarily venture capital plays, but there's, I think, a lot that can be gained, again, on the efficiency side, on the optimization side. When you start to layer in software and differentiate your hardware products, your big, heavy CapEx hardware with software, and there are clear implications for maintenance, for utilization, food safety, quality, of course, labor savings, which more and more big food companies and small food companies are faced with labor challenges. So I am hopeful that we will see more innovation and investment in that space. Transportation management, that's been touched on a couple of times, you know, really looking at load and route optimization to make sure that companies are maximizing their assets and also reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. I think also sort of hand in hand with that first mile, you know, from the farm gate to the processor, the packer shipper, has a lot of space for investment and improvement. And that's where, you know, we start to deal with some of the waste issues that we see, you know, the huge kind of numbers that we've all heard about in terms of waste at various points of the supply chain. It doesn't all happen in one place, but I think that first mile certainly has some room for innovation and improvement as well. So that's my hope. I think those things can really be a reality as well.
Jared, I'll let you go next.
Sure. It's actually, I'll just say one thing that comes to mind is really food waste to the entire global ecosystem. There's tremendous amount of waste that occurs throughout the entire system. I'd like to see advances made there to limit that waste as much as possible. And everything that was said will affect that.
That's good said. For me, I'll give an example of where I think we have to go. And there's one happening today that's very small, but take production of different crops that have huge benefits to animals. Syngenta's got one of those. We do something with high oleic, and that's a healthier oil that you can fry French fries and chicken nuggets, whatever.
We lost someone.
Is it still coming through okay, Aaron?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So you producing these crops that help either feed animals or produce a product that helps feed humans more nutritiously, tell that sustainability story all the way through, like high oleic, that for us, we take the soybean, crush it, feed that soybean byproduct to our dairy cows in a value-added product that helps like a prenatal vitamin, but also then allows that oil to go in a healthier way with the high oleic or plenish side of it, and move that forward in a way that really connects that value chain to where the consumer sees a value, everyone in between the consumer and the farmer gets value, and the farmer sees that end use finally, where it goes from their farm, they see it in a restaurant or a grocery store in a way that's advanced society. That's really where our technology's got to be. And again, I will remind you, it's got to be good for everyone in that supply chain. And we've got to get all the data points tied to that to bring it to life. But when you can do things like that high oleic as an example, and there's many out there, I think it's an exciting time to move that forward.
Great. So last minute here, if everybody wants to just tell me the one or two technology segments that you are most excited about in the coming years. For me, it's machine learning. As we get the data points together, it's being able to improve efficiencies, and then also blockchain, not necessarily for the blockchain technology, but because it's helping organize our data sets, which is something that needs to happen through the industry. So Shana, what is the most exciting technology for you if everything works out right in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm particularly interested right now in farm management information systems, and that's really the intersection of kind of digital agronomy, farm management software, and in your business, your business applications, kind of ERP light. So it's really helping farmers be better businessmen and women. It's what decisions are they taking in their agronomic activities, and how does that translate through to the P&L? And we're seeing kind of an emergence of that category. We're still in the early days, but I'm really excited because I think that's what kind of moves the needle in terms of a lot of the scenario modeling. Should I do this or that? You're planning. Should I buy this piece of equipment? But really being able to link what happens in the field to the P&L and balance sheet.
Great. Jared?
Again, I'll target one specific item that I'm actually very interested in. It has to do with 3D printing. Being able to produce foodstuffs in your kitchen, specific for your own nutritional needs. And I think 3D printing in that regard will be as widespread as a microwave oven eventually.
Great. Matt?
I would say again, I think it's technologies that really show value all the way through that supply chain. And again, I'll go back to high oleic or things of those natures. There's just such great opportunity there to improve human life, tie rural to urban, do all the things that we talked about. And that's what's been missing, is we haven't spent the time to invest in those areas that really tie things out. So I'm really optimistic to what we can do in the row crop side, or crops in general, and livestock, all the way through to the consumer, and kind of maybe hopefully eliminate some of this chatter that's been distracting that channel or value chain today.
Great. Well, thanks to the panelists for joining today. Thanks for Pete and his team for having us, and and for the audience for tuning in. Pete, back to you.
Thanks very much, Aaron. That was a great discussion, great topic area, and you managed to cover a fair amount in the hour that we had. It's a shame we didn't have a little longer. So thank you so much to Jared, Matt and Shana for all their thoughts and insights. And special thanks to Aaron, obviously, for keeping the discussion on track so adeptly. We will be running more of these webinars in the weeks to come. We'll send you details of those as they become available. But thanks very much for all your time. Hope everyone stays safe and well. We'll send the recordings out to you tomorrow, hopefully, if not Monday latest. Thanks very much. Take care.
Cheers.